while it is one story, there's like 4 different parts to it that are worth talking about. So come back in 3 years for the next part, when it comes up again. But I'm just going to look at the first part of it today, because it struck me as particularly relevant to us at Holy Trinity to hear this story about Jesus asking the disciples to do something different. Jesus is asking the disciples to do something other than what they've been doing. Try something new. And Jesus knows that he's Jesus, but the disciples don't at first realize who this person is standing on the shore. They maybe can't even really see him that clearly. You know, there's some guy over there shouting suggestions. And for whatever reason, they listen to him. But the disciples don't know that it's Jesus. And so I think this is a really interesting little piece of the gospel for us today. We're in a year of congregational discernment, right? We're doing our book club, and we're praying for each other, and we're having some conversation about what is Jesus saying to us as a congregation? What is Jesus saying to us as individuals? And this is exactly what the disciples are experiencing in our reading today. It's Jesus saying something to them, inviting them to do something different. And they don't know it's Jesus, but they listen anyway. Jesus doesn't always look like Jesus. Jesus, in fact, never looks like Jesus as we have painted him in our, Eurocentric art, right? Jesus never looked like white Jesus, and Jesus didn't look like white Jesus, and Jesus probably won't ever really, appear with the long hair and the beard and the robe. Jesus doesn't look like we might expect him to look. God's call doesn't sound like we might want it to sound for us to have certainty about it. There will be no Monty Python moment of the clouds parting and trumpets and a booming voice from the heavens. It might just be some person whom we don't know, whom we don't recognize, suggesting something. And we think, well, what's the worst that could happen? Let's try it. That's all that happened. And what happened? Not the worst, but in fact, an abundance of fish, right? The disciples are out there and they're fishing, and they know what they're doing. They're professional, right? This is what they do. They fish. So they're out there fishing, they're getting nothing. And they keep putting their nets in, or however it works, I don't really know. But they keep fishing and they keep getting nothing. And they've been at it all night and there are no fish to be had. Now they could keep doing what they've been doing. At best, nothing bad's going to happen. But they're not gaining anything. At worst, I guess their nets could wear out, they could get tired, somebody could fall asleep and fall out of the boat, I don't know, what they're doing isn't working, and the only possible change, if they keep going in the direction they're going, is decline. Does this feel applicable to our lives? But then there's a voice. Then there's some guy. Then there's some little inkling of an idea. Something similar but slightly different. Fish off the other side of the boat. Now the disciples could have said, look, we've been at this, our whole lives. We know this this job. We know how to do it, and we're going to keep doing exactly what we've been doing because this is how we do it. And we're comfortable in it. And nothing would have changed. But instead they listened to some guy who turned out to be the voice of God, who turned out to be God himself. And they tossed their nets over the other side of the boat. A little change, right? Not a big drought. Like he didn't say, give up fishing and build an oil rig. I don't think Jesus would ever say that. But, they didn't have to, significantly change their whole knowledge base. They just sort of shifted a little bit to the other side of the boat. They listened to some stranger. They listened to some voice that they weren't really sure what authority it had, but it seemed like a possible idea, a possible change, that something they could manage. And they tried it, and it turned out that God wasn't just speaking to them, but was standing right there and offering them a meal once they got to shore. And they fished so many fish, and yet their nets didn't break. This is what it looks like when we follow what Jesus is calling us to do. We're going to hear God calling us. But if we look at however that call comes and say, well, the clouds haven't parted, there's no booming voice from heaven, and you don't look like that guy, we're going to miss it. We're going to miss what God is calling us to do. And it might not even be that big of a change. It might not even be that hard for us to do. But what will come of it is abundance, is new life, is resurrection. And that's such an amazing promise to hear. That is such an amazing story to be part of. Jesus is risen. Jesus is alive. And Jesus is speaking to us. It might be in an interaction we have with a person. It might be talking to each other. It might be in a little idea that popped in your head. It might be in a way that you think, that's weird. I don't really know, what authority that idea might have, but maybe we could try it. And we might end up with 153 fish in our net. Or, a vegetarian option. But we just might find ourselves living with abundance. Because Jesus is standing on the shore. And with the rain out there today, it's possible we're going to come out to a lake. But Jesus is standing on our shore. Jesus is calling out to us. And Jesus is telling us where we should be putting our nets. What those nets should look like. What that activity might be. Christ is risen and present in our lives. We just have to realize it. It's the Easter season. It's still Easter. We are still celebrating resurrection. Every Sunday we celebrate resurrection, but we talk about it a little more in Easter. New life, abundant life. Life that will change the way we do things. For the better. For us and for the whole world. Amen.